edition of Beyond the Arc right here on High School Cube News. Brian Chimino with you once again with Michael O'Brien of the Chicago Sun-Times. A lot of changes at the top of the top 25. And Mike, to start with number 1 on Friday, Stevenson Patriots dropping an overtime loss to Zion Benton, 70-69. It was a pretty sloppy game, but what can you take away from that game?
It was an awesome game, first off. You were there too. Place is packed. Both teams wanted it really bad, wind up in overtime. Stevenson, if Jalen Brunson isn't having a great night, isn't a great team. They're a good team, but without him, they're susceptible to a loss. Same thing with Curie and Cliff. Same thing with Marian Catholic and Euless. We have these 3 teams that are very dependent on one star. But overall, I think a lot of attention needs to be played to Malik Yarbrough. I talk about him a lot. Not a lot of other people do. Joe Hendrickson pointed out in the newspaper the other day that he's going to join the state's all-time top 20 in scoring. That is all-time great, serious business, Illinois high school basketball history level. John Shire is the last person to do that. Derrick Rose didn't. A lot of other great players haven't. Malik Yarbrough is going to go down as one of the state's all-time greats, and he got his big signature win on Friday.
And so because of that win, Zion jumps up to number 5, Stevenson dropping down to number 6. Up to number 1, they're back in the saddle again. We're talking about the Marian Catholic Spartans, a big win over St. Viator on Friday after a big fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think everybody thought the St. Viator-Marian game was one to look out for. St. Viator is really talented. Marian didn't have much trouble with them at all. Then they drove down to Paducah, Kentucky, and got a win, just a few hours later, which was a real statement win. The national evaluators were all there at that event, and they were just drooling over Euless. They were really, they like anybody who's going to go to Kentucky, so keep that in mind. But they were also very impressed, and that's 2 huge wins and really helps them earn that number 1 spot this week.
And moving up to number 2, the Curie Condors. This past Sunday, a huge win against North Chicago. The game was close for a while, Mike, but Cliff did his thing, Stamps did their things, but Jaquan McLeod was a big loss as he got hurt in that one for North Chicago.
Yeah, definitely. That was a weird game. Started out with North Chicago dominating. Curie wasn't feeding Cliff. They weren't getting back on defense. And then they started to assert Cliff in getting to the third quarter, started the second half and got right back in the game. Then Jaquan McLeod, North Chicago's best player, gets hurt. So we weren't really able to see both teams firing on all cylinders going at each other. But the way Curie was able to come back in that game and then dominate that, like a 20-some point swing against a team as good as North Chicago, with or without McLeod, was a really impressive statement.
And rounding out the top 5, you have Whitney Young at number 4. And at number 3, sitting at 9-1, a team we haven't really talked about on the show too much, that's Orr.
Yeah, it's because they've played like 2 games in the state. Yeah. So not a lot of people have seen them.
And we have some newcomers in the top 25 towards the bottom. Number 23, both teams actually from the Central Suburban League, the Maine South Hawks, and then at number 24, the Evanston Wildcats out of nowhere. And they're led by a freshman this year.
Yeah, Nigel Eastern has arrived, I guess. He's in the rankings. I was a little harsh on the West Suburban. I'd given them a lot of benefit of the doubt. We had a lot of West Suburban teams in the rankings last few weeks. They've been beaten up on one another. Then they picked up some other losses, so I kind of took 2 or 3 of them out and added the Central Suburban teams. Like to get some new faces down in the bottom sometimes. Tony Laverato is one of the best coaches around, talking about Maine South.
Let's take a look at some of the big games going on this weekend. On Tuesday, the number 15 Loyola Ramblers have a chance to make some people some believers against St. Rita, who could really use a win right now.
This is a great game. Either one of these teams, whoever wins this, is bumping up way high. It'll prove a lot. We haven't really seen St. Rita with Dominique Matthews, firing on all cylinders with their whole healthy team together. They've picked up those losses on the road against teams we don't know anything about. So it's a huge night for St. Rita to prove that they are worthy of a top 5 ranking, which they well could be. And there's Loyola, who's always super fun to watch. They've got the 3 shooters, the best shooting teams in the state. They've got James Clark, Kevin Kucera, and Jack Morrissey. Those 3 guys are hot. They can beat anyone. It doesn't matter who it is. Curie, you name it, they could beat the number 1 team if those guys are on. So St. Rita's got to be ready for that. That's going to be a super fun game Tuesday night.
And in public league action on Tuesday, number 9 Bogan at number 8 Simeon.
Yeah, Simeon, they've been quiet since Pontiac. They've only played 1 game. They beat a good Harlan team, which was a good win for them. But Bogan is going to be a real force. Bogan has gone up against the best teams in the area. They're going to want this statement win at Simeon, which would be a big deal for them. Not a place they've won in the recent history.
On Wednesday, number 4 Whitney Young at number 3 Orr. This is a huge one.
Yeah, this has been a real problem for Whitney Young the last few years. They've only played Orr once, the way the Red West schedule used to be. Now they're going to have to play them twice. This one is at Orr. It's got everything you want in a great high school basketball game. And lately, Orr has really had Young's number. They've out-toughed him. They've shocked him. Young knows that now, so it's not one to miss. If you can get a chance to go, that's going to be a really fun game.
And also this weekend, you have the Martin Luther King tournament going on, actually throughout the entire country. You can read about these games and plus more right here on High School Cube News. That'll do it for this edition of Beyond the Arc here on High School Cube News. Check back next week for an all-new edition right here on the website. Brian Chimino for Michael O'Brien. We'll see you guys next week.